We were very glad when Professor Serik Ajigali Yeskanderuli, head of the Western Kazakhstan Integrated Ethno-Archaeological Expedition, invited the OutdoorWORLD film crew to participate in a working trip to the historical monuments of Aktobe region. For us, it meant going back to the places that we already knew and loved. We had already been here during the monitoring of the Ustyurt Saiga population. We often passed by the local historical sites, took pictures, but in reality had received little information about them, since our regular team includes neither ethnographers nor historians or archaeologists. This time, we decided to remedy this omission.
The
expedition was prepared within the framework of the Rukani Jangiru State Program's special project Sacred Geography of Kazakhstan. On behalf of the Akim of Aktobe region, a 6-year-long research program was designed, the 2019-2024 roadmap. Under this program, for the third year already, the Regional Museum of History and Local Law, Margolan Institute of Archaeology and Shokan Valley Kanov Institute of History and Ethnography have been collaborating in accordance with a special agreement. At first glance, Aktobe region seems a periphery, yet in fact it is absolutely not. It is located at the intersection of air, rail and motor roads and serves as an important transport corridor currently called the New Silk Road. The region has about 340 mineral deposit sites. At present, Aktobe region makes a significant contribution to the economy of Kazakhstan. In the past, dramatic events unfolded on these plains that had played the key role in the formation of the Kazakh ethnic group and state.
Работа, связанная с историей Золотой Орды, с личностью Edige.
The efforts related to the history of the Golden Horde, the personalities of Yedi Gas, Tokhtamesh, Amir Timur and other prominent figures of the past are crucial for the history of Kazakhstan and other neighboring states.
Многие исследователи, деятели культуры, общественность, конечно.
Thus, many researchers, cultural figures and the public are interested in acquiring specific historical benchmarks important for modern culture. These benchmarks should get quite specific visible incarnations like memorial monuments. We are currently executing about 14 scientific projects, including archaeological excavations, ethnographic studies of the region, as well as local architectural and sacred monuments. The comprehensive study of arch sacred monuments of the Dojoneshan represents one of the fundamental target initiatives. Since ancient times, the life of nomadic civilizations has been closely connected with the containing landscapes. The tribes that inhabited the territory of the nowadays Aktobe region skillfully used the area's landscape diversity. In the course of the violent centuries, when human life was under permanent deadly threat, the main task of the people was to survive and preserve the lives of their children and their descendants so that the genus string would not interrupt. Mountain ranges, feathered steppes, deserts and impassable sands in different sections of the year, all of them helped people in fulfilling this task in different situations. For a person removed from the nature and not adapted to local conditions, it was difficult to survive in the harsh reality, not to mention to defeat enemies. Under certain military political circumstances, even the waterless desert served as a reliable defense against enemies. We all perfectly remember the legend of Queen Tomiris, who defeated the bloodthirsty Cyrus the Great, king of Persia. Modern scientists studying the archaeological cultures of the early Iron Age are finding evidence confirming these and many other ancient legends. Persia had always sought to conquer the flowering oasis of Transoxania, the land between the Amudarya and Sirdarya rivers, and at times they succeeded. Yet when the fighting moved away from cities into steppes and deserts, the best in the ancient world, Persian infantry got defeated by nomadic cavalry. The nature itself seemed siding with the steppe residents adapted to local conditions. We left the regional center of Aktobe and are moving westward towards the Abad Baytak complex. On the way west of the village of Marjan Bulak, the expedition visits the Shagan Memorial and Cult Complex. You can find the detailed information about this mosque in the book Nomadic Architecture as a Phenomenon of the History and Culture of Eurasia by Professor Ajigali. The building was constructed in the early 20th century under the leadership of the famous religious figure Shagan Abjanuli. Over the past decades, the mosque had partially collapsed, but thanks to the architectural fixing executed by Professor Ajigali's group in the 80s of the last century, it can now be reliably restored. The expedition continues on its way. The Dojoneshan Mosque is located in Timir district on the outskirts of the village of Shubar Kuduk. The enlightener's real name was Dojoneshan Kashakuli. Ishan is a kind of spiritual rank of a teacher and religious mentor in Sufi brotherhoods. The mosque was built in the second half of the 19th century. Dojoneshan was a religious figure of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, one of the associates of the famous Kunanbai Sultan, father of Abai Kunanbai Uli. Just as Beket Atta became widely known in Mangistau region, Dojoneshan gained popular love in Aktobe region. In Mecca, he built a hotel for pilgrims from western Kazakhstan. He became famous for teaching children religious literacy and, among other things, was a successful gardener. His students carried the culture of cultivating apple orchards to the wide public. As far as we know, Dojoneshan built 2 mosques in western Kazakhstan. We have been to the first one. The mosques are currently undergoing restoration. In front of the mosque, there used to be an entrance hall and a tower where the students studied. To date, only the mosque's foundation and walls of tile and shell rocks have survived. Since 2010, the building is included in the list of historical and cultural monuments of local significance. After restoration, the mosque will become an open-air museum. During the excavations, valuable artifacts of the past era were found. Another sad fact: antiquity lovers come here with metal detectors and collect different things. It's strictly forbidden. Places of worship had always been located near water sources. Such springs were considered sacred. So far, scientists have managed to find 2 mosques erected by Dojoneshan, but they are separated by a significant distance. The second one is actually the Donestau complex close to Kainar. This is where Dojoneshan built his second mosque. The Donestau cliff stretches for 200 kilometers through the territory of Mangistau, Atirau and Aktobe regions. While some geographers distinguish Donestau as an independent ridge, others attribute it to the northern Usturt. The Western Kazakhstan Integrated Expedition has been investigating the sacred monuments of Donestau for over a dozen years and has been discovering something new during each mission. Last fall, the expedition examined in detail the Kainar monument.
Комплекс Кайнар состоит из 2 основных частей. Поселение.
The Kainar complex consists of 2 main parts: the settlement and the necropolis. Now we are in the center of the settlement. This settlement formed in the first half of the 19th century, and apparently the small cemetery had already existed here before. This is evidenced by some tombstones and the style of individual graves.
Отдельных памятников на кладбище.
The Shagan River flows along the Dojoneshan chink. In spring it fills with meltwater, yet by fall it partially dries up. Nonetheless, individual meander lakes remain and serve as drinking sites for wild and domestic animals. Perhaps in the 19th century, the Shagan was more water abundant, and that allowed local residents to engage in irrigated agriculture. The mean height of the Dojoneshan Plateau does not exceed 200 meters, at places dropping off with steep ledges, chinks. Time and erosion had cut residual table mountains called the turret cols off from the plateau. Sporadic salt lakes or their shores blocked the way for many kilometers.
Это было такое.
It was an organized settlement of a cult nature, with a mosque and a mektab. In different languages, the word mektab is spelled differently. Mektab, mehtab, maktab, and means an elementary Muslim school where they taught Arabic writing, arithmetic, and Islamic texts. As a rule, mektabs were created at mosques.
Следует отметить, что упоминание...
It deserves mentioning that certain materials about this complex can be found in the literature of the late 19th century. In particular, Sergei Nikolaevich Nikitin, a famous geologist and geomorphologist, in 1892 conducted expedition surveys of the northern Ostjord and came to this area as well. He was the one that gave the Kainar complex the title of the Dojoneshan Monastery. The ethno-archaeological expedition has discovered several similar settlements on the territory of the Dojoneshan, combining the elements of religious institutions with a communal economic structure of a settled or semi-nomadic type.
По сведениям источников, здесь...
According to sources, the local population was engaged in crop agriculture. Around the settlement, there were fields, springs, and plots of cultivated land.
Участки обработанной земли.
The life of such religious and economic communities was closely related to natural factors such as terrain, presence of permanent sources of drinking and irrigation water, as well as winter and summer pastures. Semi-settled mixed economy made it possible to use natural resources more effectively that contributed to population growth. Hunting was also important in the life of local residents. The Saiga live in the steppe areas. Badgers and various near-water fowl species inhabit river floodplains. Legends, written sources, and archaeological finds have conveyed to us the dramatic history of the period of the Golden Horde's decline, which has triggered the formation of new ethnic groups and states. In the second half of the 14th century, after the death of Janibek, the third son of Urus Khan, a fierce civil war broke out for the Golden Horde's throne. In the course of 30 years, more than 20 rulers had replaced each other. Finally, with the help of the powerful Timur, emir of the Chagatai Ulus, Toktamish, a Chingizid, took the throne of the Golden Horde and managed to temporarily end the feud. Soon he came into conflict with Timur himself. Toktamish was sure that harsh deserts would reliably protect the Golden Horde's cities along the Volga and Ural rivers. Indeed, in summer the vegetation of semi-deserts burns out completely, the rivers dry out, and it's almost impossible to lead a huge army through this huge wasteland devoid of settlements to replenish food supplies. Having heard of the approaching invader army, the local nomadic population went away to a safe distance. Tamerlane had not forgotten to take this circumstance into account and embarked on his campaign in January 1391. Just a couple of weeks later, the spring flooding began, and for a short time the desert got filled with meltwater and abundant ephemeral vegetation. Tamerlane overcame the deserts really on the shoulders of spring. On May the 3rd, on the Ural River shores, he ordered a large-scale batur. Although Timur formally honored Genghis Khan's code prohibiting hunting from winter through fall, his soldiers inflicted unprecedented damage to both cities and nature. After the defeat of Tokhtamish's troops on the Kondurcha River, Tamerlane had destroyed the cities of the Golden Horde. Apparently, his strategic aim was to push the northern branch of the Great Silk Road to the south, that is, to his own domain. After the departure of Timur's troops, Edige, Beklarback of the Golden Horde's left wing, took a significant part of the population from the war-devastated areas to the rich pastures of the Gem, Sagiz, Shagan and other rivers. Subsequently, that was instrumental in the formation of the Qazaq ethnic group. The expedition is heading to Kobda district. Near the settlement of Taldesai, Abat Baitak, one of the famous funeral and cult complexes of Aktobe region, is located.
Мы сейчас находимся на некрополе Абат Байтак.
We are at the Abat Baitak necropolis. Today it is a well-known monument in Kazakhstan. In the 50s, they finished the expedition headed by Abu Takanov, teacher and future historian from the then district center of Nova Alexeyevka, and registered the monument.
Учителя, будущего историка Абу Такенова, и памятник был зафиксирован.
Despite the fact that Abat Baitak has been long mapped as an archaeological site, its systemic examination was launched only in 1979, the same year when the Western Kazakhstan Archaeological Expedition was created. In 1979-1980, the complex had undergone a complete ethno-architectural and ethno-archaeological study. Our and my goal is to continue investigating the site and disseminating information about this magnificent place among the wide public. I believe we are working for a great cause. We hope that in the near future, many similar sites will be surveyed in detail. We are currently exploring the places where our famous Batirs, Edige and Isatai, had lived. We hope to find their graves as well.
Табу, зерттеу, жатқан жерлерін батырларымыздың.
Time, water and wind destroy everything, but all the more valuable are the monuments that have survived relatively intact.
Когда мы прибыли сюда,
When we arrived here, we were amazed that not only the unique medieval tent-shaped mausoleum, but also about 100 outstanding stone-cut Kazakh monuments, the Kulpit houses, had survived.
В Петасах содержится информация о роде, подроде.
The Kulpit houses contain information about the clan, sub-clan and division of the buried. First comes the father's or the last name, then the first name, and then the age when the person died, the time of erecting the tombstone, and the name of the person who erected it.
В какое время был установлен памятник и кем он был установлен.
Specialists from many fields of knowledge work in the integrated expedition. Only the interface of different disciplines allows unveiling the mysteries and events hidden in the depth of centuries.
Мы сейчас находимся в мемориальном комплексе.
We are now at the Abat Baitak Memorial Complex. This is my second expedition. I am primarily engaged in architecture. We produce sketches and architectural drawings as well as take dimensional measurements.
Архитектурные рисунки. Берем размеры.
For example, we can discover the previously forgotten songs or the same genealogical legends or old names and then perform the songs and record them. Yes, definitely.
Я архитектор. Родом я из Уила. С детства.
I'm an architect. I was born in Oil. Since childhood, both my father and I were into ancient monuments. We have plenty of them in Oil district, like the Kuliptases, Saganatases, and Sandiktases.
Особенно вот такие вот Кулыптас, Саганатам, Сандыктас.
The tradition of marking tombstones with sacred symbols in the form of balbals, saganatases, kulpitases, sandiktases, and other monuments is rooted in deep antiquity. In the Neolithic and Bronze Ages, sanctuaries associated with ancestral cults were designated by petroglyphs and mounds as well as stone monuments, the menhirs. With the advent of Islam, the funerary traditions had changed, but some elements that had survived from ancient times remained. Despite common features, the funeral rites performed by different clans were different. In those distant days, necropolises had not only a sacral but also quite an applied meaning. They indicated the boundaries of the domains of tribes, clans, and families.
Всего было взято на паспортизацию до 30-40.
In total, up to 30-40 monuments of this necropolis underwent official surveying and registration. Over time, the information about them has spread among the expert community and the public. Interestingly enough, the public had learned about this complex in the 90s, early 2000s. The rehabilitation and restoration works took place during 2004-2006.
2004-2006 годах.
Serik Yeskenderali believes that while restoring ancient monuments, the most important thing is to ensure science-based historical authenticity rather than visual attractiveness.
Мне 24 года. Закончил архитектурный университет.
I'm 24 years old. I graduated Almaty Architectural University and have been participating in the expedition for 2 years. The distinguished Professor Serik Ajigali had invited me to the project. For us, young future specialists, this is a tremendous experience.
Специалистов это колоссальный опыт. Оружие получается топор, копье.
Weapons, an axe, a spear, and this here is a chain armor. He was a warrior. His craft is indicated here. One day replaces another, and the expedition moves forward. Many dozens of burial complexes have been already examined. Each of them is important for science, and we wish to tell you about all of them. Yet our program is too short to accommodate the immense, and thus we will touch only upon few. At times, the landscapes seem monotonous, but the encounters of desert inhabitants brighten them up. A fox arranged a demo masterclass of gerbil hunting, yet it has to hurry up to outstrip its multiple competitors. Steppe eagles are also hungry. Saiga herds migrate across Aktobe region. The eternal wanderers go north in summer and return to the south in winter.
Сейчас мы находимся на одном из известных мемориальных комплексов западного.
We came to one of the most famous memorial complexes of Western Kazakhstan, the Alip-Ana necropolis.
Легендарной личностью женщины-богатырши, которая по легенде...
Its name is associated with a legendary female warrior. According to the legend, she was the mother of the famous Emir Yedi, the ruler of the Golden Horde.
Последнего времени бытовала и бытует среди местного населения.
This is what the locals told us. We managed to record this legend in one of the adjacent villages called Mukur.
В одном из поселков Мукур. На данном некрополе имеются остатки.
This necropolis features the remains of a medieval mausoleum registered back in 1979. These remains confirm the historical validity of the legend, saying that the Sagiz Valley was closely connected with the biography and the burial place of the famous emir.
Знаменитого эмира. Вот остатки этого.
These here are the remains of a medieval mausoleum, 14th, 15th century. These are the plinth bricks. Underneath, most likely, there is a square structure, 5 by 5 meters. Emir Edige is the hero of epics of many peoples. The Kazakhs, the Volga Tatars, the Bashkirs, the Nogais, the Karakalpaks, and the Dagestanis. Only professional historians can name many Khans of the Golden Horde, but everyone who is interested in history even a little bit knows the name of Edige, although he was neither a Khan nor a Changizid. Edige was a Beklar-Bek, or a Prime Minister/Minister of Defense in modern terms. Yedige's popularity is truly extensive. In different places of the Great Steppe, they erect monuments and memorial plaques in his honor. Just recently, we saw such tablets on the top of Mount Ulitau. This place is considered sacred. I don't know whether to believe it or not, but we'll make a wish and juice up a little. Scientists take folk traditions, legends, and epics as the starting point of their research. Any hypothesis is considered proven only after a comprehensive scientific study.
Когда нам поручили разобраться с вопросом местонахождения.
When they had tasked us with finding the location of Yedige's grave, I naturally came up with a working hypothesis that if, according to the legend, this is where Yedige's mother was buried, then we can very well conduct archaeological excavations and compare the DNA from 3 different monuments: Yedi Gas Cemetery, Alip-Ana, and Toktiata. If the analysis indicates a direct relationship, then we would gain an additional argument to continue the research. This necropolis had been operating for 500 years or even longer. The burials of the Golden Horde period have almost leveled down to the ground and thus can be examined only by archaeological means. The Kolpatases of the 18th, 19th and early 20th centuries, though, carry a lot of written information.
Если говорить о стилях,
Speaking about the style of Arabic calligraphy, then very often we encounter the Naskh, the writing style that laid the foundation for the development of Arabic writing in general. The language itself is not Arabic, it's Turkic. Currently, the science denotes it as the Chagatai language. In fact, this is our language. This is the language of the Chagatai Ulus. This is an old script and an old spelling. It's more correct to call it the Usuli one. Since the early 20th century, it has been officially reformed into the Usuli Jadid. Ahmet Baytursinov is considered its founder. For instance, here I can read the name of the buried. Shalkabai. He died at the age of 58. What about the reckoning? It's classical according to the Muslim lunar calendar. Yet the dating here is in the Julian style. Now, of course, it is difficult to believe that life once boiled here. There were meadows and pastures with juicy grass, but the climate does change over time. The Sagiz River originates in the Mughal Mountains, flows 500 kilometers across Aktobe and Datira regions, and disappears in the Pari-Caspian lowland. Baljan, let's go have a look at the Sagiz River. These are rogoznik or reed canary grass thickets. Apparently in the spring there was water here and now it's all dry. On the maps of the mid-20th century, the desert rivers of western Kazakhstan, such as the Sagiz and Amba, were indicated with a dash line as temporary drying watercourses. They would dry up in the years when there was no drought, in full water years. With the current drought, they dry up earlier and become shorter. The expedition continues on its way. This time the trip is small. It's only a few kilometers from Alip Ana to the Tokti Ata Mausoleum. We are on the eastern bank of the Sagiz River. Now the water flow is rather small, but once it was a large water artery in the area. A popular Western Kazakhstan legend is associated with this river. The legend about the parents of Batyr Edige, Alapana and Tokti Ata. Behind my back you can see the mausoleum of the legendary Tokti Ata, the husband of Alipana, Yedige's mother. Here there are the remains of a burnt brick mausoleum. In the same place, at a later time they erected a stone fence and installed an information board.
Установлена информационная адресная доска.
We continue to move along the Sagiz River. The Yedi Gas burial complex is located near the Tokti Ata necropolis.
Мы находимся сейчас на малоизученном некрополе, которое известно.
We are at the necropolis, known according to old maps as the Yedi Gas Cemetery. It was marked in the Atlas of the Orenburg territory of 1868. That is, the locals already knew about it back then.
Было известно местному населению. Однако в связи.
However, the numerous historical upheavals of the 17th, 18th centuries, specifically the fierce struggle between the Kazakhs and the Jungars, has somewhat skewed the historical memory. The fact is that during that time, a significant displacement of the population took place. This is exactly the place where they allegedly buried Emir Edige.
Захоронение, которое предполагается как могила эмира Едиге.
Emir Edige lived in a cruel age. Amidst the continual civil war, only an extremely strong and brave person could conciliate the popular army. Edige had left a mark in the history of not only Turkic tribes. His victory on the Vorskla River over the army of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania under the command of Prince Vitovd played an important role in the history of the formation of the Russian statehood. If Professor Azhiganli's hypothesis gets confirmed, this hill will undoubtedly turn into a popular tourist site for many people from different countries.
Интересно, что рядом с средневековым погребением вот целое...
Interestingly, next to the medieval burial, there is a whole series of the early Iron Age mounds. Why did people bury their dead in the same place? The simplest answer is that they probably buried where they lived and where the headquarters of their rulers were located. The latter were highly likely located in the most attractive and convenient places for life and for cattle breeding. Today, the scorched desert and absence of rivers make this land rather harsh. Perhaps 500 years ago, the local climate was different. The landscape could be different as well. The rivers could be full of water trimmed with forests.
По их берегам росли деревья.
500 meters away, there is a line of ancient mounds. Dating them without special research is risky, but one can assume with high probability that they were built at least 1500 years earlier than the Edige necropolis.
Aslan, ваша основная специализация – это ранние железные.
Aslan, you specialize in the early Iron Age, don't you?
Великие переселения.
Tell us, were the mass early Iron Age human migrations somehow connected with climatic changes or were mainly caused by political processes?
Скорее были.
Or maybe both?
Или то и другое.
Вопрос очень хороший. Я сам по себе изучаю.
It's a good question. I am studying the culture of the peoples of Western Kazakhstan who used to live in this area in the first millennium BC. We conventionally call these tribes Savramat Sarmatian. Indeed, significant climate changes took place in the early Iron Age, contributing to the formation of multiple new cultures and ethnic groups. In the course of our research, we were unable to find any monuments dating from the 7th, 8th centuries BC. Yet the number of artifacts increases from the mid and late 6th century. In fact, there are thousands of them. What does it tell us? Apparently, during the mid and late 6th century BC, the steppes of western Kazakhstan were more climatically suitable, and that attracted the nomadic tribes from other regions and areas.
Что привело к тому, что сюда перекочевали с других регионов кочевники.
Panta Rei, all things are in flux, as the grim philosopher from Ephesus once said. The climate changes, rivers alter their course, mighty empires rise and collapse. Yet the continuous chain of human life goes on. Even though more drastic changes might lie ahead of us, we should never forget our roots, our origins, where it all started. The Western Kazakhstan Integrated Ethno-Archaeological Expedition will continue its relevant and important work, but it's time for our film crew to return. Follow our project in the social networks and on the Qazaq TV's YouTube channel. All the best.